This letter came out from 1,200 of the nation's doctors saying, we're not going to speak against the George Floyd protests because the real pandemic is racism. You just realize this is complete crazy bullshit.
Was there any pushback from Native American communities, or this was typical white liberal woman that was pushing against this?
That was all white liberal women. These people have never encountered an actual Native American Indian in their life.
Do you think that DEI is fully dead, stick a fork in it, or do you think we're going to have to deal with this bullshit more?
This stuff is falling back. There's some real disgust at what was allowed to happen.
Is there a conspiracy? WEF, intelligence agencies, BlackRock, Vanguard. Is there really a money circle that goes around and pushes this bullshit stuff?
I've seen a lot of people attempt criminal conspiracies, and I'd say at least half of them fail.
Target taking huge heat for launching trans bathing suits. Why those big companies were doing that? Were they getting pressured by the federal government?
There was a lot of pressure from behind the scenes, from the Black Rocks, from the investment funds. I think a lot of companies jumped on this because
Welcome to The Future's Edge. I am Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. We have one of our favorite guests on today, but first, some housekeeping. Thank you guys for all the support you've given us on this show before. We love the live element to it and the DMs and all the retweets you guys give us. Thank you for that. To our sponsors, first of all, we always talk about how big food conglomerates have taken over the food supply. There is something we can do, and that's patronize small independent operators like Independence Arc Farms, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. It is outstanding. Secondly, if you guys know, I've talked about it incessantly about the speech I just gave in New Orleans. I believe it's time to, yes, of course, I believe it's time to buy physical gold. That's why we've partnered up with the American Gold Exchange. On our page, you will see a link to that. Please go there. Please think about buying physical gold. I know there's challenges with having it. Also, our main sponsor, unfilteredinvestor.com. Thank you guys for all the support you're giving to this. So we have Wilfred Reilly, who Bobby and I were talking in the green room before Wilfred even got there, is that it is a crime that we haven't had him on in a year. He is so insightful on so many things that plague our society right now. He is a political science professor at Kentucky State University, and he's the author, and I might get this part wrong, Wilfred, but the 3 books I've seen are Hate Crime Hoax, Taboo, and Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. Is there other books?
No, those are the 3 main major press books. The other book that I wrote was a small academic monograph, which has sold, I think, 124 copies. So no, those are the books that people are talking about.
By the way, so I don't know if you've noticed my new studio, and I don't know how your allegiance is to the University of Illinois because you went to law school there, not undergrad. But do you follow University of Illinois sports, things like that? Are you bit or no?
Yeah, no, I'm a big Illinois fan. I mean, I went to Illinois for 3 years. ILLINI. I actually went there. I think the last year the chief was on campus. I mean, the whole removal process went from you got the big guy in the back. I love it. But yeah, that whole thing went from 2004 to like 2007. I mean, I was getting out of Section C in law school like 2005, 2006, looking for jobs. So it was pretty wild. Like the anti-chief movement would march around campus all the time. The chief himself was some poor guy. He was like a frat guy who's half native. It was just absurd. He became the center of this idiotic campus controversy. He's just one of the nicest guys you'd meet.
And for you guys listening who don't know what we're talking about, Illinois had the Fighting Illini. Had Chief Illiniwek was their mascot. There was nothing did not make fun of American Indians. It was all about strength and loyalty and perseverance. And it was an homage to the American Indian. And some idiotic do-gooders stole it from us. Did I describe it right, Wilfred?
Yeah, it's a complete non-controversy, and the protest marches against Chief Illiniwek were really a prelude to BLM and Antifa and all this. There was a bunch of white chicks with feathers in their hair and guys trying to get laid, showing up with beer bottles. Like there was absolutely there was nothing there that tied into Native American Indian culture whatsoever. The idea was simply that this was something that could be seized on as potentially offensive, that could make you get some cool points as a campus radical. And it literally went on for years. I remember Siobhan Beaver, I was actually casually friendly when she went to the law school, standing up and talking about how she was just sick and damn tired of the oppression of her people during one of the anti-Illiniwek rallies. This is a upper middle class Black woman who had some percentage or other Indian. And it was just all of it was this kind of thing. So, I mean, it kind of pre-acclimated you to academic life, definitely.
Do either of you guys know if there was any sort of response from Native American communities? I know that if there was a university whose mascot was like the Flying Guidos or something, and they ran around with like a wooden spoon and a pot
We
banging it
have
with
their
sauce in
T-shirt.
it, I would become a fan of that college immediately. Was there any pushback from Native American communities, or was this a typical white liberal woman that was pushing against this?
That was all white liberal women. I mean, Jim might have more to add there, but that's true with every one of these things. Like, I was talking with one of my friends once, I forget who, and he was like, "Yeah, if you ever go out," I think it was Jeremy Carl who wrote the Unprotected Class. But his comment was, I live in Montana and there are a lot of native guys out there and they struggle with some issues on the reservation. But if you get into town, they're just guys like everybody else. They're mostly blue collar workers. They're doing pretty well financially. So when I go to church, there's a guy named Mike who just has long black hair, tough guy. He's like a trout fishing guide. And he'll just talk normally and he'll watch some football with you. And then you'll watch native issues on TV, and it's these people who are blonde, who go to Notre Dame, that have very strong opinions about this stuff. And you just realize these people have never encountered an actual Native American Indian in their life. And I do think if you actually go to a Native American community and you ask about like the Seminoles or something, it's generally total support. They're no more
Can I add to that real quick, Wilfred? Because
Right.
Florida State actually has written permission from the Seminole tribe. Now, the reason that the University of Illinois can't get that because the Illini was a nation; it was an amalgam of many different tribes, so it's not feasible to get all of them to sign off on it. But the history of Chief Illiniwek, like one of the students, I can't remember when, back in maybe the 1930s, hitchhiked to South Dakota and lived with the tribe. They made him the original suit and taught him the original native dance. They were all fired up about this shit that we were going to pay homage to their thing. And then for some do-gooders, Paul Simon, who was the the senator from Illinois at the time, not the good Paul Simon who writes songs, but he was the one who championed getting rid of it. But it's so funny that we're mentioning it because I didn't even consider that the University of Illinois and the saga that we've gone through is exactly the precursor to BLM, to Antifa, to DEI, to all the woke bullshit that gets pointed in different directions. So let's talk about DEI. Do you think, I just saw an interview you did a couple months ago, and do you think that DEI is fully dead, stick a fork in it, or do you think we're going to have to deal with this bullshit more?
Well, I think so. First of all, a couple things. I'm going to do a blatant plug here. I'm one of the founders, along with Kevin Jackson from Fox News and Brooks Crenshaw. I was an intel guy with the SEAL teams. I have a business background. We started a company called Unified Solutions America, and you can find that just by Googling. Let me make sure we actually got the correct website here. So Unified.
And by the way, we love gratuitous plugs. You plug whatever you want here. Don't feel guilty at all.
I mean, I'm not the poster boy for conventional morality. I feel pretty good about most stuff that I do. Yeah, Unified Solutions America. Yeah, we got the first website we pitched on. Yeah, it's unifiedsolutionsAmerica.com. I mean, that's USA.com, but it's all the words, unifiedsolutionsAmerica.com. You should be able to purchase common stock on that website for anyone in this large audience for this excellent podcast program. I encourage you to do a little crossover there. And we'd obviously love to host and talk to some of you guys as the founders start promoting media. But anyway, the point of all that is that the Unified Solutions America thing was a response to, I think, a major backlash in corporate America to DEI. I think this stuff is falling back. When I've talked to people at major players like Stiefel, Target, Budweiser, Bud Light, that's InBev, as you know, there's some real disgust at what was allowed to happen. I mean, Target had a major scandal around selling kids tucking underwear, like sexual tucking underwear to children, lost probably billions of dollars. I mean, InBev made, what's his name, Dylan Mulvaney, one of the in the tub Bud Light girls, which is actually more funny than anything else. Like, I'm not offended by it. But again, that didn't turn out to be the best way to pitch to young men. And this was part of a whole series of things where we've gotten to see like major institutions in America get totally corrupted by this crap. And it often went well beyond the level of humor. Like, the thing that really radicalized me, if I had to pick one, was during the first couple months of COVID panic, when I actually, frankly, just ignored a lot of the COVID rules. Like, I had COVID early on. I wore a light cloth mask around seniors. I don't want to hurt old people, but it was obvious a lot of this stuff wasn't working. It was very obvious that stuff like be exactly 6.2 feet away from people was, as it later turned out, to be made up by someone's kid in the backseat of a car. But at first you pay a little more attention, right? And then in, I think, June, this letter came out from 1,200 of the nation's doctors saying, we're not going to speak against the George Floyd protests because the real pandemic is
I remember.
racism. Yeah, it's hard to forget. And these were situations where, I mean, millions of people were in the streets together. People were not just coughing, but very few masks, like screaming at each other. They had bullhorns out. And it's you just realize that this is complete crazy bullshit. And it's taking precedence over anything else that someone could care about or emphasize. And that those sort of antics defined years of American life in the prime of life for many people. I guess what I'm saying is there obviously is a backlash to that now. That's reached a pretty high point. The point of Unified Solutions is that we want to go into companies and remove DEI. If I hadn't said that clearly, I think there's a major market for someone to look through corporate training materials. And we've got people like Local Distance on staff, Logan Lansing, Colin Wright, who are experts, as am I myself. Actually, I'm an academic who can identify the language that's been allowed to creep in, who can use an AI tool that we're designing to do that as well, and get back to kind of the colorblind stuff that used to be there. One, and two, host day-long and multi-day seminars on the roots of this stuff, like where'd the idea of white privilege come from, cultural appropriation come from, what's the Marxist underpinning of a lot of this crap. It's even the question of how can you be against diversity or equity or inclusion. Well, as you guys know, those words don't mean in the minds of the trainers in this stuff what they mean to anybody else. Equity means proportional representation regardless of performance. So we're gonna do that second. And third, through the special forces guys, we want to offer an alternative, which is kind of purely merit-based training, hiring, so on. It's based around kind of almost a military HR methodology. And time is ripe for that. I think I've said that a couple times. The last point on that would be, I don't think DEI is gone forever. I think right now what a lot of these corporations are trying to do is rebrand it. And I'll have more to say about that. But I think if you were to take 1,000 DEI just below C-level executives right now, and this actually something that just came to me, it'd probably be a good idea to do to check for the business. But if you were to do that and you were to write down the name, put that in an Excel sheet, write down the title, if you were to check on those same people in 6 months, you'd find 988 of them were there, but the titles had changed to something like head count supervisory manager or some such. And it's going to be, for those of us that are on the right and smart, there's going to be a big task involved with just monitoring that and chasing those people out. That's going to be the next step.
Bobby?
So I want to ask you about something that I saw you say on a podcast with Brendan O'Reilly. You made a comment, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember it exactly, but you basically said you were making another point, and the way you led into the point was you said, I'm not talking about the generalized racism in society that exists basically in all diverse cultures or all diverse societies. I don't remember exactly how you worded it. I don't know if you remember it. Can you tell me what you mean by that? Do you mean just the fact that, if I live in an Italian community and I see a 6'3" Swedish person, I'm going to notice it? Or am I going to treat that person differently? What did you mean by that?
Well, could you repeat the first part of that? Like I said, I wasn't talking or wasn't criticizing that
You
level.
said you weren't talking about the generalized racism that resides in basically every society where a white person notices a black person is basically what you said.
Yeah, well, I think racism, if we're going to talk about it, I think racism has to mean something. So I guess what I was probably saying in that situation is that what you're describing, like listening to it, that doesn't bother me at all. So I think that Thomas Sowell calls this discrimination 1, discrimination 2, discrimination 3. And he says the first couple of types of discrimination don't bother him at all. And I'd agree with the triple OG on this, where he says there's discrimination that consists of just noticing differences. And people on like the smart guy right will often say this, like, I'm just hashtag noticing. And sometimes it can verge into racism, like white and black guys sparring online. But very often it's just like, I notice in a city, I keep my wallet in my front pocket, not my back pocket. Hashtag noticing. Noticing differences at that level, I think, is perfectly valid and functional. And in fact, is a survival booster. So, if I'm walking through Little Italy in Chicago, first of all, if I'm walking through Little Italy in Chicago, I'm going to see how many groups of more than 3 Italian men there are around. If I'm under, 40, like, what's going on here? Like, is a nightclub, is it Friday or Saturday? But I mean, like, it just, but yes, if I were to see a 6'3" blonde, there's going to be a basic reaction of, what's that guy doing here? You got a girl here? Like, obviously there is a difference between that guy and the general population of Little Italy or Greektown. So I don't think there's a problem with that. I also don't think there's a problem between distinguishing between, say, good and bad things, which, as I recall, is discrimination 1A. So if you're in a restaurant, you order a bottle of wine and the wine is good and you and your partner drink it and you order it again, I don't think you're required to treat that wine as though it's equivalent to a terrible wine. And this also comes up with romantic relationships. It comes up with women in terms of how you might treat radical feminist dating partners. It comes up in not really race, but class relations, right? So when people talk about racism and they say that racism is offensive, I think that there are really two things that means. One is dislike of people only because of racial group membership, which is a problem. I mean, like even if you think the black crime rate is currently twice the white crime rate, I mean, that would mean literally 99% of whites and 98% of blacks are normal people. And I think any coach or any master sergeant or someone would tell you that. So just being an out and out across the board racist is generally problematic. It might have a role in, say, immigration policy or something, but in day-to-day life, if we're all here, that's a useless negative behavior. The other type of racism that I think people mean when they speak critically of racism is at least on the intelligent kind of center right, would be like extreme race science. So saying like, I believe that there are very substantial genetic differences between racial populations. So like you'll sometimes hear people say the average IQ, and someone had said this about Albania the other day. And I think that's even less defensible than some of the claims about, for example, core Africa. But so it said the average IQ in Albania is 68 or something like that. I think that's because there's not a lot of access to test training in rural Albania. Like, I don't think that's because the brain of an Albanian, it sounds ridiculous to even say this, is 2/3 the size of the brain of a Irish American or something like that. So there are ideas of racism. Like, are you an extreme racialist, race scientist? Are you an outspoken bigot? But just discriminating between people, saying, "Hey, I noticed that guy's black." I don't have a problem with that at all. Last comment from me, because as I always say, I'm a long talker. The last thing, like, also, obviously, there is such a thing as actual noticeable race, right? Like, I mean, I was playing basketball earlier today, and like the guy guarding me was black. Like, he's African American. He's got full lips. He's got curly hair. He's got braids with a hair consistency that a Caucasian couldn't do. Chocolate skin tone. He's from the Horn of Africa. I mean, like, so you can debate what that means, but it's kind of silly to say it doesn't exist. Like, they're a group of people with genetic commonality from West and East Africa, and we call those people blacks. So that you can dislike that group or you can identify certain characteristics of that group, I'd say rather easily.
I guess one of the things I'm asking about is there hope? Again, something Thomas Sowell tried to point out for a long, long time was that it's culture, not skin color. And he used the example of like Haitian blacks and blacks from Sierra Leone and these places overachieving and in education and things like that than American blacks. And I don't even really care about that. What I found a while back when I still lived in the city of Chicago, I went to a gas station at 3 a.m. with a friend who had been visiting, and he was leaving to go back to Indiana where he lived. And he asked me to assist him in finding a close gas station. And I drove to this gas station, and there were, of course, gunshots, shocker. And when I ducked down, I saw green clothing and I saw red clothing. Now, when you live in the city of Chicago, you know green clothing is the C Notes and red clothing is the Ambrose, right? Two different street gangs in the city of Chicago. And they may have changed their colors at this point, but I doubt it. And the guy in green was white, and I didn't notice till after the fact. All I noticed was that he was all in green. He was likely a member of this gang, and he was likely someone to avoid, regardless of skin color, right? Do you think there's hope for people understanding that? There's this woman now, she's just awful. She's being called the left's Joe Rogan. She has a podcast, and
Oh,
she's horrible.
What's her name? You remember?
I don't. I'll look it up and I'll blurt it out the next time you're talking. But she basically I watched a clip of hers just out of curiosity. And she said that, I currently live in an affluent, lily white neighborhood that's filled with horrible whiteness. And, my son came home one day and he said, "Hey, a black couple moved in down the street." I'm like, "Great, just exactly what we need, because this is just white hell where I live." And sure enough, they were MAGA, and we were very disappointed. It's like a clear example of the fact that it's not black people you want. It's a culture and a political view that you want. So do you think with the change that I believe you think is going on, that there's any hope for the understanding, again, that, like Thomas Sowell said, that it's culture and not melanin?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things there. First, by the way, in terms of like potentially changing colors, by the time I was a kid, I think the Ambrose wore baby blue. At least they did in Aurora.
They change.
Yeah,
Not a very scary color, Ambrose.
I mean, you have to pick a certain. And there are only so many colors.
Like the derivative gangs of the larger ones, which is basically the Latin Kings, or whether they're folk or people or all that, they change colors because they lose their association with folk and go to people, and they go back and forth.
Yeah, the Ambrose were, at least in Aurora and in parts of the South Side, the Ambrose were pretty hard. But like, anyway, like my neighborhood as a kid had a lot of people with the gang affiliations. They were mostly just normal guys. They were like mechanics
Yeah.
or skateboarders or whatever. They just occasionally would get shot at and return fire. And that never appealed to me. They seemed to be about as tough as the rest of the guys in the area, but they had this additional problem that they had to deal with. But at any rate, I mean, yeah, I think that, and when I think about some of those guys, I'm not going to give like individual names for people that are now pretty successful, but yeah, they were pretty diverse. I mean, there was White Folks was a guy who was Caucasian. I mean, Arturo was a guy who was Hispanic. Rio was a guy who was Black. And yeah, a lot of those mid-sized gangs in certainly the integrated inner suburbs, yeah, it's everybody. I think anybody from that environment, we've got Irish guys, Italian guys, Mexican guys, Black guys, would say, no, I don't view race as a primary identifier. But one of the reasons the crime rate is so slanted in the USA, actually, is just that the urban hyper ghetto has become more Black. So, I mean, it's a weird thing that happened. Like when I was a kid in Chicago and later in East Aurora, I mean, the gang violence was probably 3-2, Black versus white and Caucasian Hispanic. But they were large gangs like the Gaylords, the Popes. They were tough white guys. That, and plus there were HA bikers, that kind of thing, that were in the city. And that mostly vanished. I mean, those people, as a result of busing effects and so on, moved to tougher Southern communities and that kind of thing. Started seeing that consolidation of the inner city as a Black concept. I mean, you've got some Latinos, and including some Wedo Latinos left in like Little Village and so on, but you mostly, if you go to the hood now, you have Black people. And that means the guy, the robber, the thief is going to be a Black guy in Chicago. That's unfortunate. And when I came down to Kentucky, I'm not a racist in any sense, but I realized that it imprinted a little bit. Like my first apartment was just a working class apartment. I was a junior faculty member. I'm not a weakling myself. My girl's Irish and from Chicago. So like we just set up our stuff. And there was a basketball hoop down the street, and I was like, I still play, but oh god, we're gonna have this bunch of young Black kids. Like, what's gonna happen here? Like, let's go talk to them, see what they're like. And it was a bunch of young hood white kids, and I was like, oh, this is Kentucky, that's right. This is no better. But I had the pre-existing stereotype here. And no, like in Lexington, the projects are all white. Okay, so Lexington, that was a tenth the size of Chicago. So whether or not there's the same murder rate, Chicago's gonna be vastly disproportionate. That the Black numbers are going to be 10 times the white numbers. So the culture, yeah, it's virtually identical. There's a whole book about that, Black rednecks and white liberals. How do you
Thomas Sowell?
Yeah.
Hold it. Can I add some real quick? Because it sounds when we're talking about white rednecks and what did you say, Black with the whatever.
Sowell called it Black rednecks. It's the same culture. It comes out of the Southern integrated.
So I think we're talking about something we haven't said it out loud yet, because we're talking about parts of society where the family unit has been degraded over the years. So my contention has always been that you throw, again, I'm from a family of 6 boys. We had to move out of the Italian neighborhood of Chicago because when my dad started having boys, he was like, no, these guys are going to be mafiosos if I don't get them into the suburbs. So that's the reason we left the city. My point is that it wouldn't, if you take any young boys and raise them among other families that have just mothers and no boys, things are going to get completely and wholly messed up, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think I want to hear what Bobby has to say about this too. But yeah, I think that there's this second variable, which is that you just touched on, which is extreme single motherhood. So like in the old Italian and Irish slums, I mean, you can criticize the old Black slums. You look at the writing on Philly and so on. You can criticize the guys there, but I mean, you had dads in the house. The tough dads too. They're like hit you with a boot if you wanted to get involved in crime, like, so there was still a lot of temptation. You could go down to the pool room or whatever. It was all there. There were prostitutes in the area, but your father was very much there, had a blue collar job or a white collar job or owned a store. Now something that's been added to that is epidemic single motherhood. So, I mean, in the Black community right now, the single motherhood rate is 70%. Whites just hit 36%. And people often focus on either Blacks alone or those two groups, but it's the same for everybody. Actually, natives are 66%. Remember now, with a lot of poor whites and Black people identifying natives for 4% of the country or whatever, Hispanics 52%. So like this is a national cross group problem. And so you don't just have like slum areas like you used to where you have that temptation. You also have virtually no regulation of that. And that's where you get, last thing for me, but like when we talk about like the old large gangs that you have 5,000 GDs or C notes, and they all wear green or whatever. It's not like that anymore. Like I still listen. I listened to hip hop music until a couple of years ago, like new stuff. And now that I'm over 40, it's I don't want to listen to a bunch of teenagers talk about shooting each other. Like these would be the guys on the other side of a gun battle now if they try to rob my house. Like it's less identified with that group. But I mean, like it's no longer like people are claiming GD. People are claiming some specific block. Like it's like this is 600. This is Lamron. And if you're from that area of Chicago, you know like what that street is. Like it's from this candy store to that corner store. And it's almost sad. It's the total collapse of kind of civilized order with no fathers. The old parish church is closed. Like it's a specific thing. And it's problematic.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, GD being gangster disciples, people now go, we're O Block, we're not G. We'll fight with other GDs in a different neighborhood. So it's become much, much worse than it ever was. Sterling pointed out in the comments, it's Jennifer Welch that I'm talking about.
Okay, I've heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah, and then third gen widget, that's Widge. He watches a lot of our shows, comments with some really intelligent stuff. He just commented, absolutely, it's culture. So back to what you said, neighborhood I grew up in, one of the things that I lament about the decline of Chicago, for example, is the corner tavern that was within the neighborhood. It wasn't on a main street, right?
Mhm.
It was on a side street, and it stems from it being the only place in the neighborhood, in a working class neighborhood, that had air conditioning. So it wasn't even that people drank. It was hot in the summer and they didn't have the wealth to go to Lake Geneva. So they went to the corner tavern just to be cool during the day. And then they went home at night. That existed in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I would go to the tavern, and my father worked as a non-perfect English speaker. He didn't have a union job like a lot of the guys in my neighborhood did. And he worked a lot more. So I'd go down there with my friends. I'm talking 15 years old, 14 years old. We would go in the local tavern and play pool. Nobody would sell you a drink. And the second you acted up, all I needed was one of the other dads to say, I'm going to call your father. Done, over, scared to death of that happening. So to the point about the father being missing from the home, this is something I sort of have my own opinion, Wilfred, but I wanted to ask you about it because if we stopped focusing on the race of these things happening and started focusing on the actual symptom of fatherless homes and no discipline in the home and however else you want to word it, we might actually have some success with tamping down some of these problems rather than defunding the police.
Yeah, I think there are a couple problems there. One, there are some racial differences. So, I mean, like the black rate of 70% is even worse than the god awful Hispanic rate of 50% and the god awful white rate of 40%. So, I mean, I don't mind more critique coming to us. But the real problem, I think, is the amount of chaff that prevents the discussion of the real issue. So, like, single motherhood itself has become a fairly toxic thing to discuss because of the whole, and this is one of those things that I'm just sort of straight up conventional conservative, like Elmer Fudd guy about. Like, it's become very hard to criticize people in groups that can plausibly claim to be oppressed. So like the other day on X, I pointed out what I thought was absolutely obvious. Like marriage is good for men and women. And then I did one of my like, bro, like, no, don't marry your girl. But like, it's also slightly better for women. Like it's a monogamous love relationship. If you cheat and get divorced, she takes half your stuff. And I mean your stuff, like the investment account you had before the marriage. Women describe themselves as more sexually, financially fulfilled. Your income triples. And all these women started responding like, but what about the emotional labor I do in marriage? How dare you say? And there's nothing wrong with women also do great things in marriage. But the idea has become that it's very toxic, very negative to criticize anything a woman or minority might ever do. So if you are a single mom, you're making a strong, brave choice, and you must surely have left an abusive relationship and so on. So it becomes very hard to say, like, look, you have 3 kids with 3 different people. You're obviously screwing up your life. You need to get a job or latch on to the next guy and move forward. So that's part of the single mom conversation. Like single moms are supposed to be treated as almost heroes. We've got single mom cards in stores now. My mom wasn't a single mom, but she and my dad got divorced. They both did a good job, but that's not the ideal. And that needs to be presented as not being the ideal. Like to some extent, I come from a Catholic background. Like you failed if you got a divorce. And there's nothing wrong with saying that you failed at different points of your life. I mean, I've failed to become a successful college athlete. Like I've failed to make $1 million ever in like a year plus period. But you can't say that the failure is a success, and I think that that's what's come up a lot with failed marriages. That's what's come up a lot with multiple kids you're not supervising for men. So that's part of the discussion. And instead of the last element would be, instead of dealing with the real issues, like men abandoning their kids or women, frankly, dotting around having multiple kids with different dads. I have multiple female friends that have like a black, white, an Asian kid, like they're collecting. You know, I mean, so like other than the focus being on that, it's on this bullshit. Like defund the police is an insane idea. We all know it's an insane idea.
Yeah.
Did you see the debate between Evan Warfa and Matt Walsh on Twitter the other day?
No, tell
No.
us.
Okay, this is the guy goes by Evan Loves Wharf. The other guy, Matt Walsh, the conservative commentator. They're both
Yeah, I
male,
know him,
obviously, sort of bro comp. But so this Evan Loves Wharf guy, there's a situation, and it's an unfortunate situation, but a group of kids thought they were playing some dumb prank. They broke into a homeowner's garage. It's 6 young males, mostly black athletes. And the guy sees 6 males on his Ring camera in the garage. He comes to his door with a gun, says, "Get out" once over the Ring. They don't get out. They're kind of taunting. You'd think this is a joke. He opens fire through a light panel door, shoots one of them, and says, "Now get out." You're like, "You're in my house. I'm opening fire." They all run away. And Matt Walsh says, "Look, this is a tragic case, but if you break into someone's house, if you're in the curtilage, if you're inside the buildings of their house and you're threatening him, you can use your terray, you can use your firearm." And I agree with Walsh here. But
I do too.
yeah, and so the other guy, Evan, responds by saying, "I think it's a tragic situation, but the guy who shot should go to prison. Whatever else should happen to the kids, you should go to prison for several years." Walsh then responds by highlighting a portion of Evan's bio that says prison abolitionist. So it's been up there for like a Democratic Party official, prison abolitionist. And it's just, I guess there's not really a point here other than everyone realizes at some level when real things are on the table that these ideas won't work. It's just so difficult to criticize black crime, single moms, 100 other issues, inner city white problems for that matter, opiates, that we've been talking nonsense for years and just sort of hoping that one of the nonsense solutions would work and would solve a problem. And that's never going to happen. And when we tried to defund the police, we jumped over 22,000 murders for the first time since like 1995. That was 2021. Thank God we came back from that.
The defund the police people, I love when you catch them a year later, like, no. I didn't mean actually defund the police. I meant fund social work. Bullshit. We know what you said, and you pressed it at the same time. I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier and then branch it in to the trans thing. And I know you have some opinions on that. I've heard you speak it before. But first I want to set that up by
I'm still here.
okay, good. Back, we were talking about Target. We were talking about Target taking huge heat for launching whatever trans bathing suits, whatever they were doing. I want your opinion on why those big companies were doing that. Were they getting pressured by the federal government? And then I want to bring it to this trans epidemic and want you to pick it apart and figure out what the hell is going on. Because I work at a high school now. I just started coaching basketball. And to see these kids who obviously are so mixed up is heartbreaking to me. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think the big companies are doing it for a couple of reasons. One, I think that there was a lot of pressure from behind the scenes from the Black Rocks, from the investment funds, so on down the line. And as an investor, certainly not an institutional level investor, but as someone who follows this pretty closely, as someone who, with the Unified Solutions guys like Kevin Jackson, has really looked at the pressure that goes into the C-level. My opinion would be that HRC, Human Rights Campaign, GLAAD, GLAAD, what is all the alphabet soup, like ESG, SEL, ERC, all that stuff.
You're asking the wrong guys. We don't give a shit about that, and we didn't memorize them. But yeah, right.
Like, so ESG is environmental social governance, if I have that correct.
Right.
I might be off on some of this.
No, you are, yeah.
SEL is social and emotional learning. CEOs in particular were getting really hassled about how they were incorporating this into like their line of products, like their turnkey. And I think a lot of them were just like, okay, let's just do some bullshit so we can tell BlackRock or we can tell Vanguard that we are, we've met our year 4 line 2 goals or whatever. And that's how you get like the trans model in the front of the store. And some of it can even be pretty silly. Like I was at some overpriced women's store with my partner pretty recently, and she noticed that all of the models were plus size. Like she recently went on this giant gym kick and she's like, I'm kind of offended by this. I'm a size 6 or whatever. And like all these models are easily like 14s. These are some big dolls.
Hey, are you body shaming, Wilfred? Stop that body shaming.
No, but I mean,
Hey, before you go on, do either
like,
one of you like laugh when you see those semi-glutide commercials and it's all really big people? I'm like, it doesn't look like it's working.
It doesn't look like it's working at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're in a tough position because they have to appeal to like the potential customer, but they also can't make fat people look that bad when they talk about like, you'll be so much better than what you are now, you cow. Yeah. Like, I mean, so I've actually talked to people that have done some of the marketing for that. And it's weird from like a lawsuit or woke harassment perspective. But I think a lot of companies jumped on this because they thought it would just be a mild thing they could do to appease the vanguards and so on. And they didn't understand how irritated ordinary people were getting by it. And I think that that's something kind of important to realize, like, because when you're making decisions, you're making them at the individual level. So like in your commercial, you're deciding, do I want the black guy to be the hero or the villain? And you're probably saying one off, well, most commercials through like 1995, the black guy was the villain, I'll make him the hero. The problem is that everyone is making the same decision. You all went to HBS together. So like 90% of the time now, the black dude who's no more virtuous than the white dude is the hero. And so you get these entire X accounts and websites called like white men are dumb in commercials. People get outraged and there's a huge backlash against you. And that's where we were for a while. That would be my opinion on what happened.
19. So I have a theory on this as well, and I want you guys to both comment. And 2019 was the first time I ever changed a buying decision based on any of this.
Gillette.
Right? Exactly. Gillette.
Bingo. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And, prior to that, I always said, I remember engaging a friend of mine who's on the left, and we're still very good friends. And it was like, oh, I'm outraged by this. Don't buy that. It's bad for the climate. Don't buy this. And I'd be just like, dude, I work and stuff. I'm like, stop. I'm not thinking about any of this stuff right now. I'm just trying to get my work done. And he's more of an artistic field. And I was like, you don't think about like what you have to get done from 6 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. like I do. So I'm not worried about that the soup I just bought is not in a recyclable container. I'm not worried about that right now. Maybe I will later when I'm independently wealthy. And then the Gillette commercial came on, right? And I remember seeing the Gillette commercial and I went, you know what? Fuck you guys.
Yeah,
It was like, the best men can be, originally titled We Believe, I think. And it addressed toxic masculinity. I'm like, I am busting my ass 6 days a week and I'm toxic the way that it seemed. And I went, screw it. I'm going chic. And is it chic? Yeah, chic. And I've gone chic ever since. Now, honestly, I still to this day, don't think that chic is as good as Gillette in terms of a shave. I don't shave much, as you can see, but I never went back. And I think to a certain degree, the pressure that you talk about, I know was a real thing, but I think to a certain degree, many people thought conservatives won't do it. Like conservatives won't leave New York. Conservatives won't take their businesses out of California. Conservatives won't stop using Gillette because they're too busy with real world stuff. I think it's happening now. Am I nuts? Am I overplaying it? Am I just patting myself on the back?
No, I mean, I think that's basically correct because I mean, the biggest predictor of past behavior is future behaviors, or the biggest predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Yeah, spin that around. So I do think when companies looked at the reaction of the right in the past to the craziest moves they've made, implementing mass affirmative action, it was always two members of like Young Americans for Freedom standing downtown somewhere waving a 6-inch American flag. And when they looked at the reaction of the left to anything, it was like hundreds of Jesse Jacksons marching around outside, the Chicago Foot Locker, claiming they were going to boycott Air Jordans. And so you became more attuned to the left than the right. And I think like the right with things like the Bud Light boycott did make the point, like we are, if you're talking about white or conservative minority Americans, especially dads, we're the majority of the purchasers in the country by far. So you guys do have to stop doing things that directly offend your actual customers. And I mean, there is one of the things that's interesting about this is the disconnect between customer base and marketing lead that we saw with a lot of these companies. Have you ever seen a picture of the team at InBev that greenlit the Mulvaney thing?
No.
Yep, I have.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, Bobby. I mean, it's like, so first of all, like the three of us actually kind of look pretty similar to what Bud Light's marketing team should be, except we might be too formally dressed. I mean, it should be like a mix of like dads and like frat boy interns, maybe a biker looking guy. I mean, you sell like a mediocre light beer that people drink 10 at a time. Your goal is people that grill, it's fraternity parties, it's corporate events. Your audience is 80% male. There aren't a lot of women poking a Bud Light with a fork and drinking it. So there's a very specific demographic there. The marketing team that hired Mulvaney was, I'd say, about 60% female. It was almost entirely upper middle class, Ivy League. Someone was wearing a Bennington sweatshirt. I think you guys might critique this. But I mean, so it's just like you see this across a lot of industries. You see this very much in gaming and so on down the line. And when you look at the companies that have really gotten in trouble for woke, I mean, it's Harley Davidson, it's Bud Light, it's Target. It's people that are pitching directly at the American middle class kind of bro and
Disney.
wife market.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, right. Yeah.
So I want to point out, Jimmy, before you ask your next question, that Sterling also put in the comments here. Notice how all the Hollywood people who were championing the big is beautiful mantra all started taking Ozempic as soon as it came to market.
Yeah, that's a not to
Right.
jump in on your audience comments, but that's a crazy thing. I mean, Amy Schumer is followed by like my partner and one of her friends on Instagram or something, and Amy Schumer just deleted every single picture of herself fat, like which would be there's like boudoir booty shots. It was like stuff that
Such a
had taken
joke.
hours. Like, I mean, pictures of her
It's
on
such a
like
joke, but
Oprah.
now I want to go look at the pictures. Go ahead.
I can't. That's obviously a tempting intro. I don't know about it. That wouldn't bother. But like, just the whole point though is that she'd gone through this great effort to present herself as like still a sort of sexy girl's girl, despite the fact she was getting chubby, and she was never all that fat. I mean, but it was
Yeah.
just body positivity. This is what a real woman looks like. You know, the men still love this. All this crap. I mean, she takes Ozempic for 8 weeks and it's all down. She's now skinny again. She's hitting the gym. It's a wrap. And I think that the whole body positivity movement is going to go this route. Like, as more people can afford these GLP-1s, as more people get back to the point of aggression where they'll work with a trainer twice a week, body positivity is done. I mean,
I
like,
love it. I love it because, I'm against the GLP ones just because I think a couple things. One, the problem isn't obesity in this country. The problem is insulin resistance. Bobby and I have done a whole health series on this, and it's not our opinion. It's a multitude of doctors. So you got to stop thinking about fat people. Like it's not. That's not the problem. There's no whether you're body positive or body negative. It doesn't take away the fact that chronic diseases stem from insulin resistance. I want to mention something about Bud Light because I own a bar that's is like it's conservative as shit. It's like the night Trump won, it was crazy, and I hate it. And I try to tell people not to do politics there. But Bud Light was our number one selling bottled beer up until Dylan Mulvaney came out. 98% of it dropped and it never came back. Now, the point I was trying to make is that, like you said, Bud Light is a shitty, watery American lager beer. Like the NFL can do all kinds of this bullshit and preach to me about stopping hate and stopping racism. But the NFL has a monopoly. I mean, if I make a decision that I'm not going to watch the NFL anymore, it's a big decision in my life. Where moving from Bud Light to Coors Light is nothing. So, but you don't think there was anything sinister? Because I know the CEO of the marketing team, or maybe even InBev in general, was former CIA. Is there a conspiracy? WEF, intelligence agencies, these big companies, BlackRock, Vanguard. Is there really a money circle that goes around and pushes this bullshit stuff?
I think it depends what you mean. I don't think that there were. So, having grown up in the hood when Bobby and I were talking about fairly knowledgeably about Chicago gangs, or having trained as a lawyer at a pretty good school, I've seen a lot of people attempt criminal conspiracies, and I'd say at least half of them fail. And of those that succeed, there's usually something that comes out about the conspiracy down the road. I mean,
Italians did it pretty good for like 60 years. I just want to add that in. But anyway.
But I mean, you've got mafia dons from the real mafia now that are hosting podcasts. Like Sammy the Bull is talking.
It's funny as hell. Yeah.
I watch all of those. I watch all of them.
Yeah. Johnny Mitchell from the Connect on the other day. He was just like, yeah, that's how I killed the guy. And it was like, Jesus, shut up. I mean, they're revealing omerta, Sammy. But like, so I mean, I think that very effective conspiracies that spin around the world totally unknown are pretty rare. I think what you have a lot of are shared interests and narratives within specific groups of people. So I think a lot of these people went to the same colleges. I think they internalized the same kind of weirdo, half-baked Marxism without really thinking much about it. And I think a lot of them progressed into the same environments and kind of passed this stuff back to each other. Peter Boghossian calls this idea laundering, where concepts that don't really make a lot of sense, like SEL, which is sort of the idea that you should be graded for niceness, is something that's now being discussed at the state university level as perhaps something we can apply in our lessons and very serious stats classes and so on. So, I mean, that's all around in the background. And I think that background, that kind of ambiance, obviously shaped what people were doing and looking at. And I don't think there's one coherent answer. I mean, I think companies were sometimes told, like, your SEL score, your ESG score is going to go up if you do this. I don't think there's one guy behind the scenes that's pulling these strings. I think a lot of these guys like Klaus Schwab, or that lunatic Brazilian Marxist who walks around dressed like Lex Luthor, don't make things easy for themselves because they're such obvious, macabre villain figures.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think like Hillary Clinton is pulling the strings and executing multiple people. I think that there are ideas that are very prevalent among the upper middle and upper class. They're mostly wrong ideas. People at the level of Bjorn Lomborg and Bill Gates have recently come out and said, look, like we ran the climate change models again with modern AI and like we're not going to die. But I mean, like many of them are wrong.
Also, power our data centers because that's what we do now. So let's use coal for that. I did want to pivot real quick. We have time for one more topic, really.
Okay.
So the trans thing. That's why I wanted to talk about Target. I wanted to go back to trans because, like I said, I coach high school girls basketball, and I'm going to run into this issue too.
Okay.
I have long held that nobody really believes that biological men should be competing against women at the highest level. I don't think even the people who are pushing it the hardest. What I think is, one, they have no real respect for the institutions of competitive sports. And two, they just really want to piss everybody else off and then hope that I'll say something that can be made into anti-trans. What do you think of that thesis?
Well, I'll answer this one pretty quickly because, like we said, I'm gonna jump out, head to a class. But like,
Sure.
I think that there's probably a lot of truth to that. Again, when I mentioned some of those guys, Evan, the guy who's going back and forth with Matt Walsh, the other day on social media, and I follow both of those guys, he said, I don't really care about the medical stuff or the athletic stuff. I don't think any of that outweighs the importance of not discriminating against trans people. So I think that, and I think this is a crazy position, by the way. I'm not a lib,
Crazy.
but I mean, I think that is the mainstream liberal position. Like we've got these people, we all know they're a little cuckoo, but they're a little mentally ill. They're not really harming anybody. They're think that their dick is evil. I mean, like if you actually read some of the analyses of what gender dysphoria is, it seems very unpleasant. And we just want them to be as happy as possible. They can't go into women's prison. I think everyone's been consensus on that, even on the left now. But they can let them use the locker room. They have cameras in there. They're not going to hurt anybody. Now I totally disagree with this, but that seems to be the mainstream left-wing position. Who are they going to hurt? They're these crazy males that mostly weigh 120 pounds. We have just as many females on our side that want to change with the boys. Who finishes second in state high school track is not as important as these nuts not killing themselves. That seems to be what a lot of these people really think. To me, I disagree with that. I think it's terribly unfortunate if some badly damaged kid hurts or kills themselves, but you can't make 300 women terribly uncomfortable at seeing your naked penis 4 days a week in the public gymnasium because you're nuts. I mean, that's not how we operate society. Like one person with a quirk or fetish can't screw up everything for everybody every day. Even things like peanut allergies to me are a little close to the line. Like, are we going to stop everyone in school from eating nuts? But at least okay, there's a medical reason. We understand that some people are allergic to ground nuts. Okay. You can't say, and I don't mean to be crude, but I'm allergic to my nuts. Everyone has to accommodate me in every possible respect while I pretend to be a girl. Final point. Does anyone believe this? I don't think so. Now this again, I need to redo this experiment as a real survey because I've been riding on this one for a couple of years now. But one of the first large things I did when I started using these new social media tools, like I had my Survey Monkey link when I figured out I get those totally anonymized. I had it on my Twitter when I got up over 100,000. And I just asked a very large audience, do you actually believe that some women have penises? Not like, should girls compete with their gender rather than their sex, some vague question, but do you believe that some women have dicks? And I expected about 30% yes. Like my page is a very male, bro, urban audience, but it also includes everyone's feminist girlfriend and wife and the female lawyers that follow me from cases and so on. So I expected about 30%. Yeah, it annoys me, but that is the standard position of the medical associations. But when people went through the two levels of anonymity on Twitter and through SurveyMonkey, I believe 1.9% of people, 2% of people said yes.
Wow.
98% of people said, no, I absolutely don't believe that. That is not real. And I think that is probably the case. I don't think that there is a single lesbian woman out there that actually doesn't know what a vagina is. It's just fantasy and nonsense and woo. And that's the reality that underlies this all.
Pitch your books real quick before you go. What book should people start with of your catalog?
Probably Hate Crime Hoax. My 3 books are Hate Crime Hoax, Taboo, 10 Facts You Can't Talk About, and Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. They're all pretty good. Hate Crime Hoax is a sort of original research book where I look at all of these very high profile cases like Jussie Smollett, of claimed racism from white against black, sometimes black against white, Republicans against Democrats. And I find that most of them, like Yasmin Saweed, Duke Lacrosse, we're just complete bullshit. And I asked the question about why this has been going on for 20 years. And I think I answered the question pretty well.
I think you did too. There was the swastikas being written during the election on some school a couple towns away, and everybody was up in arms like, dude, are you kidding me? Guess what? Yeah, right. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to play him out because Wilfred's got to go. He's got to go teach a class because he's a professor at Kentucky State University. So, Wilfred, please leave whenever you want, but follow him on Twitter, read his books. These are voices that we need to wade through so much bullshit that's eyeballs high around us. Thank you guys for joining us on The Future's Edge. Thanks to our sponsors, Independence Arc Farms, patronize independent operators. The American Gold Exchange. Contact Dana Samuelson. Own physical gold and silver. You won't be sorry you did. And finally, and most importantly, unfilteredinvestor.com. Please go on that website. Mike and Bobby have been absolutely on fire with their technical analysis. There's not many people who I would partner with and not think twice about it, and those guys are two of them. Thank you, guys. I'm Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. This is, what show is this, Bobby? The Future's Edge.